Hello and welcome to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network, brought to you by Campbell's new chunky spicy soup. It's time to get fired up. Make sure you find the Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe, please rate and review the program. I'm your host, William Lou. I haven't been able to say this in a month, but joining me is co-host Blake Murphy. Blake Murphy, welcome.
Murphy. Hey day. Blake Murphy. Hey day.
We're back.
What's going on, Blake? It's been a minute since we've seen you. As I mentioned, when I first came into the office today, you were already obviously at the desk. And even though I got there 2 hours before the show, regular time, you're already there prepped.
Yeah.
I was like, you're trimmer than I remember. You're fresher than I remember. You got more color to you. What's going on in life in the month since you've been on the show?
Yeah, it's a lot has happened. So, it was supposed to be a reasonably sized break, but not quite this long. We were off for All-Star. Then I went to the Dominican Republic for a week, which was really, really nice. And then as I was getting ready to come back on the show and return, I got really, really sick. I had to go to the ER. And then a couple hours later, my appendix was out. So as I joked on Twitter, obviously I was missing OG a lot. I was missing the 2019 Raptors. I wanted to miss some time due to appendicitis. As our pal Samson put it, God gives his strongest defenders his weakest appendices.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Me and OG on the shelf. So I'll miss the media game on Wednesday in addition to missing a bunch of extra shows.
Right.
Because, I can't be taking those rogue elbows from you to the midsection right now.
Oh, I would never do that. I mean, attempting to play defense is not something I do.
Yeah, but I was thinking more like a legal screen or a push off or something like that.
Okay, that I would do. I will push you off and then pop open for three. And hopefully make it. Yeah, the media game. I don't know. I guess eventually we'll be able to reveal some details about this.
Yeah,
but
I've got some scoops coming at some point this week.
It might be the most scintillating Raptors news that you will hear all week. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, Blake, very, very great to have you back on the program. It's been great to, big thanks to all the co-hosts who have been able to step in and cycle through. And of course, a lot of guests, everybody stepped up. But I mean, it was a big effort because it is not easy to replace you on the show, man.
Is doing a 2-hour show solo difficult? Because I got a whole summer ahead running that back
How
for a
do you
third
do
time.
this with the Blue Jays? I mean, I think it's better when they play every day, but
And they're
holy.
better. Yeah, they're relevant.
But man, 2 hours every day. Some days you're like, I got to prep for 4 guests. I got to come up with ideas for tomorrow, the rest of the week, every single day, something fresh to say. Like, I was like, man, it's nice to have a co-host to just like literally talk to for at least, which we're going to do for 3 segments today.
Yeah.
And then we're bringing in Hanif Abdurraqib.
Yeah, which
is
I'm very,
really
very
cool.
excited about. Yeah, he's got a book coming out next week on the 26th, but it's out for pre-order now already. We'll plug that a bunch of times through the show, but it's called There's Always This Year on Basketball and Ascension. Hanif, one of my absolute favorite writers on music, on culture, on life in general, and then we get a more basketball-oriented book from him. Really excited to pick his brain about that and read that when it shows up. With respect to the show while I was gone, man, can't say enough about how good a job you did. I mean, it's not easy to mix in different co-hosts and stuff like that, especially pieces of work like Samson. And listen, Samson, S, Lindsay, Katie, Amit, JD, I will be revealing, I power ranked you all and the job you did as co-host. So I will reveal those rankings at some point this week as well, if you want to tune in for that. No, it was great. It was fun. It kept the show pretty fresh, I think, during a couple of weeks where, let's be honest, the Raptors, there are things to focus on. There are players, you know how I feel about the G League guys and the player development side of things, but the stakes are pretty low right now. The leverage of these games is not super high. So I thought you guys did a great job keeping it fun, keeping it fresh, mixing up the guests. Ahmed doing a great job, and Daniele loading up the guests. And then man, today we got Hanif. This is a nice transition back and a not a meaningful game yesterday, but a fun enough Raptors rematch with the Magic. This is the real reason I came back, by the way. We get 2 Magic games in a row. I'm not missing my Magic.
We had to put out the Blake signal, the bat signal, I needed your help with this one. No, more than anything else, the one question I asked everybody was, what are you still watching Raptors games for? What are you still tuning in for? And so I will ask you this question on the wake of a back-to-back loss to the Orlando Magic. Raptors lose last night, 111-96, kind of inevitable the entire way through. They played scrappy, competitive. It was the same thing as Friday. But the Magic kind of ground them down, and ultimately the Raptors did not have enough offense. Paolo Banchero looked awesome. The general picture of, like, what are you watching these Raptors games for, besides obviously employment and, your lifelong dedication to this franchise?
It's a little tough, right? Because, I care a lot about the individual player development side of things. And I love seeing G League guys get a chance or bench guys get a chance in a larger window of time. But if you are evaluating the long term or even the next year picture for this team, so much of what you care about is how those individual progressions orbit around Scotty Barnes, right? So we can look at Immanuel Quickley day to day, and Immanuel Quickley had a really great stretch of games, less so last night, but he had a really great stretch of games there, and that's good. It's important that he's getting better. It's important he's getting more comfortable as a pick and roll point guard, finding his 3-point shots in pull up scenarios and things like that. But what really matters to the franchise is how would that coexist within a Scotty Barnes environment? Where is the Quickley Barnes chemistry developing? Because that chemistry was really lagging behind everything Quickley was doing individually before Scotty went down hurt. So it can be tough to, really extrapolate what we're seeing individually with what's going to matter next year. Having said that, yeah, it's the individual growth stuff that I'm looking at. I think it's great that, we're seeing them play through the centers a little bit more, especially in the first halves of games. They've gotten away from it as games go on, but you're seeing them play through Kelly a little bit more. We've seen kind of a resurgence of Jonte the last little bit where they're playing through him a little bit more, and that second unit looks fun. That stuff's important. The buy-in to the ball movement, all that stuff is important. But really, we're looking at what these guys are doing individually. And that ranges from, at the high end, Immanuel Quickley and the fact that you have to pay him this offseason. And yes, the things you care about most are how he coexists and kind of what that ecosystem would look like with Scotty Barnes. So you're left to kind of extrapolate imperfect information from that. But that matters. It's still useful. And then at the low end, you've got Jamias Ramsey, where it's like, you're not evaluating for his fit with Scotty Barnes long term. You're evaluating, should we sign him for the rest of the season at the end of this 10-day?
Yeah.
And, I love that stuff. That stuff is very, very interesting. It's just not, the highest fidelity thing that you're like information that you're going to be able to glean. And there are some spots in between there, right? Like I mentioned the Jonte resurgence, that's cool. I think we can officially, with the extra opportunities he's gotten here, close the book on the Jalen McDaniels era. Like I know he's under contract next year. And then, you're looking at individual things like, hey, I thought Ochai did a really commendable job effort-wise against Paolo Banchero these last two games.
Yeah.
The results weren't there because Paolo's really, really, really good. Gradey Dick, we've obviously seen a really good stretch of play, and now we're seeing teams are responding to that a little bit. The Orlando Magic are a particularly physical team that he struggled with. So, okay, let's see how he responds to that the next time they play a physical opponent. So there are a lot of little individual things like that. It's kind of where my focus is, because even if you were to care about the results, they're not going to win a lot of games without Scotty and Jakob and now RJ. They're going to lose games, but the best case scenario, if you care about losing, is they're tied for sixth last right now. They could get sole possession of sixth last, 43.5% chance of keeping your pick. And then the fan base and before the Scotty injury, even talking to people around the team, like everyone seemed pretty split on whether you'd want to keep the pick or not. Obviously, if you get the number one pick, you're going to make the most of it. But there is an argument for conveying the pick this year and freeing up next year's pick, particularly if you're pessimistic about next year. So it is hard to focus on the results and take much from them. So I am left with a lot of individual progression evaluation, and you've got to do some stuff with, hey, how does that, this is the ecosystem it exists within. What would that look like in a proper ecosystem? That's imperfect, but it's what we got right now.
It is what we got right now. There's a lot that you mentioned there. I think for me, number one, like it's really exciting to see the highs of a player's game. I actually sometimes like to see the lows of their game because it tells you a lot about where their game is right now. What are some of the limitations they got, right? So these last couple of games against the Magic, it was actually really funny when Savannah was saying on the report, she's like, I talked to Kelly Olynyk. This was like right before the game started. Savannah was giving the courtside report, and she's like, I was just talking to Kelly Olynyk, and he was explaining to me how the Magic have advantages across the entire front line, and I'm like, oh, Raptors Magic, stay tuned. We got to see the mismatches across the board. But I did think that level of physicality that the Magic played with the last two games. Number one, it's very important for the Raptors to even approach or get towards something like that, because defensively, this team has just not made any impact pretty much all season, outside of the first month where they were good. But how these young guys in particular respond to that style of play. Like, I actually wanted to see how Quickley would look against a Jalen Suggs, who would provide a lot of physicality, how Gradey would be able to get his shot off against some of these bigger players. How would he guard against a bigger player like a Franz Wagner, for example? And, of course, naturally, you're going to lose most of those matchups. but at least it shows you like, okay, these are the things that they need to sort of work on to get better. What did you make of Quickley in the last 2 games? Because he was quite quiet in both games, both in in the teens rather than in the 20s scoring wise.
Yeah, I think, and the assists weren't as high as we've kind of been used to. Even yesterday, he had a 4 turnover game, which is very rare for him, right? One of the turnovers was like a really notable one where he runs a pick and roll with Jonte, and he's got that probably not pocket pass, but the over the top pass to Jonte on the roller, and he tries to make the 2-level away pass to Bruce Brown and throws it out of bounds, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's and maybe that was a miscommunication with where Bruce was supposed to fill to, but it was a bad read.
It's a mistake.
Yeah.
Fine.
And those things are okay. Like you can, we've talked as an NBA community over the years about how actually turnovers aren't a bad stat for rookie point guards, because sometimes you would rather, and this is true for Scottie as well when he was taking on more point guard role, is you can be okay with mistakes if it's a mistake because you're being really creative and you see a pass there that would be such a valuable pass if you can make it, versus if you're only making the simplest, safest plays, and that's why your turnovers are low. So you can live with some of that. I thought, Quickley, and this is true of Gradey Dick as well. The book on him right now seems to be to get in his space. And that's something that the Magic are really, really well equipped to do with Jalen Suggs. And then Markelle Fultz comes off the bench and does a good job of it as well.
Yeah.
Quickly, and this is maybe you miss Jakob Poeltl a little bit here because Kelly Olynyk is not the same style of screen setter, but Quickley really struggled, in my view of it, to get any level of space away from those guys. Now, that affects, obviously, your ability to pull up from 3 because a guy's in your jersey and you've got to beat him first before you can get in that space. And then
I feel like Quickley also needs to do this weird toe tap thing before he can get the pull up 3 off.
Yeah.
It takes him an extra half beat, usually with his right foot.
Yeah.
I noticed a little bit.
Yeah, it's almost like it's a step back footwork, but for a pull up.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So yeah, I think the book on him right now is to get in his space, and he even struggled with Jalen Suggs picking him up full court a couple times. There was the near 8-second violation, just like on a standard 1-man press. Which again, Jalen Suggs is really annoying. He's really good at that stuff defensively. But yeah, if you're a starting level point guard, you can't get 1-man pressed into an 8-second violation, or even just eat 8 seconds off the clock. So I think, being physical with him, getting up in his space is the book on him right now. And the challenge for him, especially, you're not going to have Jakob back. And if you do, it's going to be a handful of games.
If you have Jakob, like, you're still going to need him to get you screens all the time versus like being able to hold your position. And this is why it's been interesting, because we've seen it against Nemhard when they played the Pacers. We've seen it against, even when they played Dallas, Josh Green took a couple of possessions, applying the same type of physical defense. Like, the book will slowly start to come out on some of these guys, and it's about how they adjust to those things.
Yeah.
So we know that that's one area for Quickley to work on. For Gradey, last night I thought it was interesting because he kept trying to go to the basket and almost jump into guys, accept the contact, and then try to finish around it. I think in general he's been a pretty good finisher from different contacts and different angles and things like that. But what have you made from Gradey in terms of just the physicality in these last couple of matchups?
Yeah, I thought similar to what we said about Quickley. The Magic physicality was what gave Gradey issues. I know he banged a couple of threes in. He was 2 of 3 on threes, so that continues to be a real strong suit. Like obviously, so much of what we talked about early in the year was, hey, he does all these other things well, and that's really great, but you're not staying on the floor as Gradey Dick if you don't hit your threes. And he's been really, really good. He's up toward the league lead in corner 3-point shooting now. Overall in 3-point shooting since the turn of the calendar, he's been really good. So those are positives. And I, again, back to the point of sometimes mistakes are good if you're a young player. He had another one yesterday, very similar to the Quickley one, where he tried to make a high-level read and he threw the ball away. But seeing that as you're attacking a closeout rather than forcing it at the rim through traffic, being able to see that read and try to make that pass is good developmentally. If the Raptors were playing for wins right now, you'd pull your hair out at that. Absolutely. But with where they're at, that's an okay read for him. So I think some of this is the physicality of a team like the Magic, and they are just like, the second you try to attack a closeout, they're chest out, arms wide, and like you're gonna have to drive through that. You're not going to be, Grady's really good at kind of making a sidestep on the baseline and getting into that reverse move that he likes. The Magic are not going to bite on the sidestep because they want you to come right through. Like they're stronger than you and they're bigger than you. It's funny to play the Magic twice after all these trades the Raptors have had, because they're a team against, you really notice how small the Raptors are now.
Oh yeah, tiny.
Yeah. Where like Ochai's the 4, right? And
Yeah.
Gary or
Right.
Gradey are nominally the 3, and like neither of those guys is a 3 strength wise. So there's some of that there. I thought defensively the Magic did a pretty smart job, and this is the benefit of having Paolo and Franz as well as at least one point guard on the floor at all times. It's like there's always it's really hard to hide Grady Dick against a team like that, right?
Yeah,
like you could put him on Gary Harris and hope for Gary stay in the corner, but Gary does a lot of lift out of the corner or even go into off-ball pin downs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I thought they did a good job hunting it. There was one play late where Paolo got, and this might have been the dagger right before the final timeout where they put in the bench. And Paolo has Grady, and they're alarmed enough about it that in a face-up situation, not even a screen and roll, Ochai and Grady try to switch, just like right in front of the ball handler, and Paolo's just so quick to pull up the 3. Like you gave him a little bit of space as you try to navigate that. What you almost have to do
That's
is
the coward's way out, almost, honestly. Just
for Paolo.
No, for the Raptors. Like, how are you going to switch the matchup when the guy's got the ball? Like, no,
right. And if you're going to do it, to be careful on Paolo, the move is almost you send a double and then have Grady be the guy that peels off. But like Paolo just bangs one over top of them, and that's game over. So look, this is good learning stuff. I didn't think when Grady got hot that this was going to be it, that he was, fixed and it was going to be perfect from here. He's only shooting 37% from the floor since Scotty went down. So there's obviously room for growth there. And I think some of this, in addition to the physicality, and Darko had mentioned, the potential rookie wall a little bit, and he's been playing 30 minutes, which he hadn't done before. I think some of this is probably also, Grady Dick got good.
Yeah.
So teams are paying attention now.
Yeah.
Like Scotty's not in the lineup, Jakob's not in the lineup, RJ's not in the lineup. Dude, who are you game planning for, right? Like Immanuel Quickley's the top of the list. But you're going to pay some attention to Grady Dick and try to take things away from him. So
these assistant coaches have to find something to do, something to show them for the 5 to 10 minute video walkthrough or whatever it is before you play the Raptors. And I it's actually interesting because Darko said something at practice on Saturday. First, did you know the Raptors had practice on Saturday? Because that just completely went over my head. But when I saw the note, I was like, oh, okay, cool. I watched the practice scrums. And one thing that Darko was explaining was Grady had done a lot of work all season with the assistant coaches. Shouts to Ivo Simonich in particular, who has always worked with them all year, on being effective out of the corners. And whether you want to say that Grady being one of the highest percentage corner three-point shooters this season is a direct product of that, I wouldn't question it, to be honest. They've clearly got him comfortable operating out of the corners. Now, in his new role, especially with the injuries, he's playing a lot more up top. This is what Darko was explaining. And that could lead to a little bit more adjustment for Grady. What do you make of that theory in terms of, in addition to the fact that he's on the scouting report, there is a bigger load. There's also, he's playing against starters now versus playing against second unit. There's less guys setting him up. He's also playing at a different spot on the floor. That was also an explanation Darko offered.
Yeah, that's a different style of play, and it's a different style of 3 also, right?
For sure,
I thought one thing he's done really well, and I just looked at the numbers, he's up to 49% from the corners on the year.
Yeah.
Which is really, really good, right?
He wasn't even that strong out of the corners in college, if I remember correctly. He was much better above the break.
And that was part of why a lot of the draft people were certain the shooting would translate, because his diet of shots at Kansas was more difficult than spot-up shooting specialists. He was doing a lot of movement shooting, a lot of deep shooting. So, look, it's great that the corner 3 stuff has come along. You see with a guy like Ochai how valuable it would be to just knock a couple of those down, right? Or even, OG's old role in the offense, right?
Sure.
Of just most of your offense is going to come from the corners. You're going to be one of the highest volume guys in the league. And that's super, super valuable, even if you personally would like to do other things. Now, if you are building out what Grady is going to be for this team long-term, you want to see more of that above the break stuff, because there's just more dynamic stuff you can do. You can't run action. I shouldn't say you can't. You can do some stuff to get a guy on the move and catching in the corner, but you're facing a 2-boundary limit there.
Yes.
Like most corner 3s are going to come from you just standing there stationary, where yes, on the weak side of the floor, you have some gravitational value, but as a shooter, you're going to have so much more value to the offense, to other players in your offense, if you're moving off the ball and you can do a lot of off-ball movement stuff. And you can only really do that if you establish yourself as a movement shooter and a wing shooter. So he's only at 26% above the break so far. That's obviously a skill that needs to continue to grow. And I don't know how much of that is, I didn't get as granular as looking how many of those are off movement. I don't think he has a ton of pull-ups on the season, maybe a couple
He took a
dribbles
couple,
in
which was
transition and
nice.
stuff like that. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, generally speaking, no, he's catching and shooting.
Yeah, and this
90% of the
is,
time.
our pal Caitlin Cooper had a good thread the other day, good thread the other day on Twitter about Tyrese Halliburton's shooting struggles and all the different things that can affect even an elite level shooter like that. And Gradey Dick is not Tyrese Halliburton; he doesn't have the ball in his hands that much. But even a guy who is, changing the offensive dynamic of an entire franchise, level good shooter, can be subject to some of these things when you take away one of your screening partners, or hey, your hamstring just isn't 1,000%, so your pull up off the juice is not quite the same level. Grady's experiencing his own version of that, which is, when you were really bad, teams would leave you open in the corner until you could show that you could hit that. And now he's being shown, hey, you're going to have to attack those closeouts along the baseline. I think he's done a pretty good job showing that he can do that, but the Raptors are going to have to lift him out of those corners and run a lot more off-ball stuff for him. The hard part about this, too, is going to be that ideally, if you're running Scotty Barnes, Jakob Poeltl pick and roll over on this side of the floor, and then you have RJ also on the second side, and he's the one setting a pin down for you, that's a lot for the defense to take into account, right? But now you're running a Immanuel Quickley, Kelly Olynyk over here, and the guy you're working off is Ochai, maybe, right? It's just a different amount of defensive attention, and a different amount of value to the gravity that you're having. So it's a challenge. Like that 26.1% number above the break. Yeah, I'm going to keep an eye on that down the stretch, and hopefully you can nudge that up above like 30% by the end of the year or something like that. I don't think there's anything. I think it's a little too early to, we're talking like less than 100 3-point attempts from above the break. So it's too early to take too much from that, but I definitely would believe it as an explanation for why it's been a bit of a struggle the last couple games.
Yeah, and I think, to your point, you can run so many more actions when you can play at the top of the floor. You saw him recently running a lot or involved a lot in the Spanish pick and roll or the Spain pick and roll, whatever you want to call it, where you have Gradey in this case is kind of screening the screener in this case. So usually the big, because Kelly would be going to screen for the ball, and then Gradey would screen for Kelly's man, and then he would pop out for three. So you are seeing a lot of those 3-man actions involving Gradey in the top of the floor. Even before that, it was a lot of Kelly with Gradey, and then of course Scotty initiating a lot with that group. Right now, it's just you have to see what that looks like, especially against starting units as well. And I thought, Suggs was kind of an antagonist the last 2 games. It just seems like Suggs really enjoys playing against the Raptors. I would say in terms of Raptors antagonists, there's not that many of them in the league right now because I don't think people care enough to antagonize the Raptors. But Jalen Suggs,
like Patrick Beverley, I guess, but that's all verbal, not actually doing anything.
Right, exactly. What's he going to do? Play defense harder? You know what I mean? I feel like for Suggs, he's definitely part of that. And I think when you look across the board to Orlando, and this is a point you wanted to raise, was just it takes a while for the rebuild to actually settle in and then to show some of the fruits of that rebuild. So I actually wanted to ask you, when did Orlando's rebuild actually start? Was it 2019 after they decided to break up the previous team which the Raptors beat in the playoffs? Or was it even before that in Dwight Howard when they traded him in 2013?
So I think it's been 2 front offices since then, right?
Sure, yeah.
So I think it's been 2 separate rebuilds. They did the post-Dwight rebuild where they were out of the playoffs for 6 years. They went, what did they go? Jacques Vaughn, James Borrego, Scott Skiles, Frank Vogel, Steve Clifford. All, and Vucevic was they had some fun teams with Vooch and Fournier and the resurgence of DJ Augustine at one point. But
define fun, man.
Yeah, we were trying to talk ourselves into Alfred Payton.
Oh, God. Right.
There were some weak years. So I would consider that its own rebuild. And then they never got good enough where they always had good picks. Right? What's the lowest they picked? Was 16 for Chuma?
Can I read you the draft history of the Orlando Magic dating back to 2013?
Buddy, can you?
All right. So this 2013.
So 2012, they traded Dwight. So this is the first post-Dwight draft?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so they finally tank. They get 2013. They get the 2nd overall pick. And to be fair, it was a really weak draft outside of Giannis at 15, which nobody could have really seen coming. This is also the year the Raptors drafted Bruno, by the way. Victor Oladipo at number 2, which sounds like maybe not so bad. Honestly, maybe within the context of the draft, not so bad. But it wasn't like he was doing that much with the Magic. All I remember was him getting crossed up by Kyle Lowry once before Kyle set up Landry Fields for his 1-3 of the season.
Another note on that draft. Do you know who went 1st and 3rd around Oladipo?
Was that not the Anthony Bennett draft?
Yeah.
And then 3rd, Who went third that year?
Otto Porter Jr.
Oh, Otto Porter Jr. Yeah, that's right. We haven't even mentioned that he retired. That's
Yeah.
actually coming up at
Yeah,
around
we'll
the
save
NBA.
that for around the NBA.
Because that's no longer Raptors news. But it is kind of wild that we just completely forgot about that last
Kelly
week.
Olynyk, 13th in that draft too.
Yeah, they had like okay-ish players.
Yeah.
And of course they had, I think Jokic also was in this draft in the second round, or maybe that was the next draft. But in any case, they had the second overall pick. They took Victor Oladipo. They ended up trading him. 2014, the year afterwards, they drafted 4th overall that year. They got Aaron Gordon with that pick, which again, like it created some great moments like the dunk contest for them, and shouts to Stuff the Magic Dragon. But also Aaron Gordon got traded in this one for Gary Harris, who is still on the team. But like, come on, like, that's a lopsided one.
It's also a tough one where like the 4th overall pick, you kind of hope that, especially in like the Embiid draft,
you want a star.
Yeah,
you want
and Aaron Gordon was a really important player on a championship team last year. Like Aaron Gordon is a very, very good player. And like Depot, even before the knee stuff, was a really good player as well. And
but
as
he only broke out until he got to Indiana, really.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, so even if you were to say, hey, he would have been that for the Magic, like they did. And this is the struggle with the rebuild and why the Raptors are a little more confident than, say, the Nets, because they have Scotty Barnes, who could maybe be that guy. The Magic did an okay job, as we'll go through with these, drafting supporting pieces.
Yeah.
But as we'll see in the next one, they also had a couple whiffs.
2015, they had the 5th overall pick. They took Mario Hezonja. Yeah. I believe that the billing for Hezonja at the time was, what if J.R. Smith was Croatian? I think that was kind of the plug. 2016, they had the 11th pick, but they didn't actually use it for a player of their own. It would have been great if they kept Domantas Sabonis, who has obviously since become an all-star, pivotal part of the Kings, who we'll see on Friday. But they actually traded this pick alongside of Victor to the OKC Thunder for Serge Ibaka to temporarily pair Serge with Bismack Biyombo in 2016. They took Bismack from the Raptors, cashed them out. Bismack, I think, was making $2 million with the Raptors for that 2016 championship run, or Eastern Conference, run, whatever. And then, they gave him like a $68.4 million deal afterwards. But in any case, they traded those 2 picks, lottery picks, for Serge Ibaka, who then they immediately flipped to the Raptors midway through the season, and they got like the 29th pick the following year, which they took like Anza
Pazikis,
who has not really done anything at all. That same draft, this is when Jeff Weltman finally takes over. Also another, piece of the Raptors. Goes from Raptors front office to head up their front office. 2017, they take Jonathan Isaac with the 6th overall pick.
Which is like, it looks bad with where Isaac has ended up here.
Yeah.
But when he's been healthy, he's been like an all defense caliber defender.
He's impactful.
And like at the, like, sure, you look at who went after him in the next couple picks in that draft. Like, obviously, Donovan Mitchell's the guy. He went 13th.
Yeah.
And a lot of teams, like the Pistons are still kicking themselves for taking Luke Kennard over him. Bam went 14th.
Right.
But I don't think Bam was in the discussion as high as 6, if I'm remembering right. Yeah. Like the one guy you would have said, oh, that's the guy you miss on, was Lauri Markkanen, who took years to become Lauri Markkanen. So I can understand the Jonathan Isaac one. Obviously, there are some vibe things around Jonathan Isaac over the years. But I think that I'm willing to chalk that one up to the guy missed 3 seasons because of like persistent knee stuff.
Okay.
And that's why, I guess also he never even averaged 12 points a game. So for 6 overall, that's tough.
But again, to be clear, this has been a team that has been at the very bottom since 2013.
Yeah.
All the way to 2017 now. Their big reward so far is Jonathan Isaac at 6. The following year, it gets better. 2018, Mo Bamba at 6.
Yep. And again, and like obviously you can do the what if with every draft pick and every draft, but a couple spots after Shea went.
Yeah.
Like they have Wendell Carter Jr. now. They could have taken him with that pick.
Right. They at least pivoted. And this is where finally they did pivot. 2019, Chuma Okeke at 16. Okay, like a decent-ish player. Wasn't even in the rotation last time. I'm not going to read this note that I have in here on Chuma Okeke, but it is kind of cracking me up as I look at it. You know what? Fine. Congrats on drafting a big Jama Mahalela. Anyway, 2020, they take Cole Anthony with the 15th pick, which is a nice bench player.
Great value for 15.
For sure. And then finally, 2021, Jalen Suggs at 5, which, honestly, for 5, whatever, but he clearly is a very productive starter for them.
Yeah.
And then Franz Wagner at 8, another, really, really good player for them. That was a product of them pivoting to a rebuild with Vucevic. And then Paolo, 2022, and Anthony Black this year, which created the Gradey Dick meme.
Yeah.
But in any case, it's really only been the last 4 years, you know what I mean, where it's finally turned around, because we're talking about a whole decade's worth of being in the lottery.
And this is kind of the warning of rebuilding, right? Because we came into this year and I was super optimistic about the Magic, right? I was really excited about them. They were my lock for an over and my team to watch and stuff like that. Right. And even now, they're at a point where they're fifth in the Eastern Conference right now, and they're fifth in the Eastern Conference, and we're talking about them as, well, maybe they could give a team trouble in the playoffs as they continue to move up, and like, what are they going to do to support this group? What are they going to do in free agency? So they're still a couple steps away from being really competitive. They're in the fun stage right now.
For sure.
And this is a team, like you just laid out, who has taken over a decade to get there. Even if you want to say, let's clean the slate they made the playoffs those 2 years, they brought in Jeff Weltman, that's the reset point. That's the rebuild point. Well, even then, you're talking about 6 or 7 years. You could get even smaller than that. Let's just say, hey, since the Cole Anthony pick, that's what we want to look at here. They have picked in the lottery 5 times over the last 3 years. They have unquestionably hit on at least 3 of those. Like, I would say Paolo, Jalen, and Franz are all, considering Jalen and Franz went a couple picks apart, like if you flipped which one went at which pick, you would say all 3 of those hit really well so far. Yeah. And then even before that, Cole Anthony at 15 is a good hit as well. You get a really good bench piece at 15 and have signed him to a pretty team-friendly extension.
What's his deal?
3 years, 32, I think.
Oh, that's
or 3 years, 36, maybe.
That's a great deal.
Yeah. So you have hit on all of those things. And then one of Anthony Black or Jet Howard maybe hits from your lottery picks this year.
Yeah.
You had a really, that's a 4-year run of pretty solid drafting with extra picks in the lottery. And you're still sitting here being like, okay, well, what else?
Right.
And that's and I like Franz a lot. I like Paolo a lot. Like, I like this team a lot. And even then, they've been through the wilderness of rebuilding, and you're still sitting there like, okay, well, what else? How else do they add to that? And this is the tough part about a rebuild. And I don't mean this specifically for the Raptors. Like, look at what Detroit's dealing with. Washington is going to get the #1 pick in a bad draft class. Yeah. And, like, we'll see. The Wizards are, by the way, are the team that we'll do some March Madness stuff later in this week.
Okay.
Like, you're not supposed to overreact to a couple games in March for your draft stock, right? Like, as an NBA team, you're supposed to have all this film and all this stuff.
Yeah.
The Washington Wizards are guaranteed the most likely team to overreact to a March Madness run. Like, remember DeAndre Daniels, how the Raptors overdrafted him in that same Bruno draft, in large part because he had such a good Final Four run?
Yeah.
DeAndre Daniels could go #1 to the Wizards in this draft if there's another.
Can't
like
wait.
Andre Jackson Jr. last year. Yeah, exactly.
It's going to be amazing.
No, Purdue is not well coached enough to go on.
Wow.
Sorry to Zach Edey. I can't ride with that level of coaching on a long NCAA tournament run. Anyway, this is all to say the Magic are fun and in a good place, and they have executed a vision that has been very similar to the Raptors front office over the last couple of years.
Yes,
But even with good drafting, good re-signing, and a couple of smart predatory trades like the Vucevic trade, they're still a couple steps away. That's how much has to click right for you in a rebuild.
Yeah, so we do have a long way ahead for the Raptors, at least. I think in terms of comparing, maybe even not even comparing rebuilds, because there's not that much similarity. I think it's really the timing of when you end up letting go of some of your former players who aren't really getting you to a winning franchise. So, for example, when they traded Vucevic, they traded him at the exact very, very peak of his value. And I think that they might have done that with OG. I don't think they quite did that with Pascal.
They didn't, I don't think.
Yeah, but in any case, like, at least they pivoted and added those extra assets because, as you mentioned, it's not just enough for you to tank in your own picks. You also need to hit on additional picks to help support and supplement the roster. You look at the Raptors roster, like it's obviously you've gotten former like first round picks in players like RJ, who was 3rd overall, and Quickley, who was in the 20s, but like still you need more and more and more. The higher volume of those you have, the better, and at least you were able to get extra picks out of that Pascal deal. But yeah, I mean, that for reference, like it takes a very long time, and
it does. And like even look at to use a more current example of a team that's a little earlier on the timeline. You look at Portland, right? Like they've got. I mean, Anthony Simons is on his 2nd deal now, but he's still a very young player. They've got Shaedon Sharpe, who when healthy certainly looks like a hit. Scoot, we'll see. Statistically, this is one of the worst point guard rookie seasons we've ever seen. Talent-wise, he still looks solid, but this has been a discouraging rookie year. And they've got they've got their own pick this year and another potential lottery pick coming. So that's what they're looking at. Like, hey, 3 recent guys that we're building with and a couple of lottery picks coming up. So it takes a lot. I mean, I guess if the Raptors, they would currently have picks 6, 17, and 32, which that's not bad.
No, it's not bad at all. Like, this is exactly kind of what you need. You just hope that, again, like the Raptors hit on like ideally 3 of 4, if not 4 of these like selections coming up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because that's the level that it's going to kind of take. Yeah, there was a brief interaction that we had with Masai. He popped into practice one day, popped his head in, and we had a little chat. It was like a couple reporters in there. At the very end, he was like, "Enjoy the rebuild, guys," and then he walked off.
Was that? Wow, that's ominous.
Anyway, on that note, we're gonna take a break. I'm your host, Will Lou. You've been listening to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network, brought to you by Campbell's new Chunky Spicy Soup. Welcome back to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, Lou. Continue to be joined by co-host Blake Murphy. One guy we forgot to talk about before in block one of the show is Gary. I feel like Gary's been getting more time. He's been starting. He's been getting more minutes, maybe showing more consistency, making more plays on and off the court. On the court, real quickly, is the preeminent Gary hater on this program. Have you enjoyed this Gary renaissance?
Is that a thing? Am I a Gary hater?
I just want to brand people.
I think he's very good at his role, and I just don't think that role is a $25 million a year role. No,
it's not going to take 25, is it?
I mean, those were the numbers thrown around last year when it was like, hey, he's got an extension done, and
what's the most you would be willing to pay Gary right now?
17.5 annual, and like even that's on the high end. But I think you probably
that's like roughly what he's making right now.
Yeah,
like you continue his contract right now.
Yeah, and I would re-up that, and it's not going to be terrific value. The problem with a big money Gary contract is that there are guys who I shouldn't phrase it like that because that's not fair to Gary. Good front offices can find the type of production Gary brings when he's shifted back into a bench role. You can find that less expensively.
I hear you. Okay.
There are rookies who come in for teams and can play that kind of role in some way.
Right.
Cole Anthony is not the same type of player, but for a similar offense first bench guy, he's getting $12 million a year. Gotcha. The mid-level is going to come in around $12 million a year. You should be able to get a pretty good shooter for the mid-level. So I don't know that I go too far over that. The thing that obviously the offensive consistency is important right now because there isn't a lot of offense on this team. So him putting up 22 a game since Scotty's been out and shooting really well is important. This is the annual stretch of the season where Gary's playing good defense lately. And it's the Gary style of defense where it's there are some gambles.
But he just crowds you with the hands and he rips you, and that's why he has a lot of these pick sixes.
Really good hands, and he's had some pick sixes, and he's up around 2 steals a game over the last little bit. We've seen it wax and wane too much over the last couple of years to really buy in it. But I think he's been solid, and this is I think this says something about Gary's offensive game where that type of offensive profile travels, right? Like he's going to be able to get his shots. And he's had cold streaks, but scorers are going to be able to score. But for a guy who's 25 and has been here a couple years now, I do think there's been a steadiness to him and him picking up the defensive side of the ball. And obviously the results aren't good defensively. That's not how we're evaluating this team right now. But I think it does say something to his growth and maturity level that he has actually looked like a steadying voice and one of the. He's looked like one of the more senior players on this team. 25 is not old, but he's the longest tenured Raptor playing right now, right?
Yeah. Wow. A lot of changes have happened this year when you put it like that. It makes your head spin. Off the court, Gary's also showing, I don't know, maybe his wisdom, his age, or his experience in life. He's apparently giving Gradey tips on tattoos. So I believe Gradey does not have a tattoo, which I suppose is not uncommon for a 20-year-old. But as somebody who does have 2 arm sleeves, what kind of advice would you give to Gradey on his first tattoo?
Yeah, so I mean, I have lots of tattoos. Both arms are done. I got one on my back. I got some thigh and lower leg tattoos.
Right, right. We did see your thighs on Instagram. Which,
I mean, I was on vacation, and the quads are what they are. You gotta play to your strengths.
I don't think if people have the issue with the quads, it was the feet on the ground.
Yeah, I mean that was. What are you gonna do? And nobody seemed to have issue with it. It seemed the opposite. It seemed the opposite. Yeah. It wasn't a people were mad at it. I had the other problem.
No.
Getting DMs asking for, are there any outtakes? Do you have any where your feet are sandy?
Lord.
You don't need to do that. So first of all, Grady, don't get a foot tattoo. That'd be a weird thing. I think the biggest piece of advice that I would give, and this is something that has not bothered me in the past in the NBA, but I'll call him out. Bebe did not follow this very closely. Don't get new tattoos mid-season. Like, it's not good
Okay.
for like
Yeah, that's actually really good
the
advice.
tattoo technology is far enough along that like it's not the end of the world if you like get a tattoo sweaty or like someone bangs up against it or whatever. But it's not what you want. It's not like
Okay.
Bebe one time played like 2 days after having a giant calf tattoo done.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
like,
not-
man, there's too much risk of, and this isn't about your basketball. This is about the quality of the
Yeah.
tattoo and
But
it's
it's also a
healing.
little about your basketball.
Yeah, and how you treat your tattoo while it's healing determines how long that's going to. Like all my colors stayed really, really good. I'm heavy
yeah.
on the sunscreen and stuff
Nice.
like that. You got to take care of it. So I would advise that you wait until the off season when you know you got a little bit of time there to get your first one. Don't time it with like your end of season getaway vacation because you don't want to overexpose that to the sun. Otherwise, it could fade in those early days.
Right,
that
right.
kind of stuff. And then I would say based on, and this isn't a Gary comment because Gary has some really good like likeness tattoos, but there are a lot of bad tattoos around the NBA and in general of like faces. You got to pick your artist really, really carefully. If you're trying to do like an homage to someone or a family tattoo or something like that, just be careful.
What do you
on
think?
that regard?
So we also saw Gradey Gate yesterday.
Yeah.
Grady and Anthony Black doing the jersey exchange.
Whoopsie, as he posted in the Instagram comments.
100% made for memes moment, which obviously went super viral yesterday between the two rookies. With that in mind, what do you think Grady's gonna get tattooed? It's gonna be something silly. I feel like he's definitely got a silliness to him.
Yeah, like I don't know I'm not a TikTok guy. I don't know the TikTok game or anything like that. But
he's gonna get tattooed,
I
man? A
know.
little TikTok
No.
note?
I just know that he's silly on there, right?
Okay,
and
right.
at least pre-draft did a lot of stuff on there. So I could see him doing something very tongue in cheek, very silly with it.
Right.
Although I don't know, he's also a big family guy. You like as a first tattoo, it's hard to go wrong with something family oriented. Unless it's like a full back piece of your parents' faces or something like that. Again, there are a lot of bad tattoos out there, so just be careful.
There are some bad tattoos for sure.
Can't go wrong on the family side.
Right.
I'm sure, like, look, basketball players, tons of guys have their numbers or something basketball related that's important to them. I think it's like to get your NBPA membership, you got to have a Kobe tattoo. It's it's there are a lot of there are a lot of safe ways you can go.
Got you.
And I guess the other thing that I would say, and I didn't follow this so I have one arm that is like really meticulously planned and one arm that is like, I'm in Chicago and I met this tattoo artist. I like throw one on me. That's it. If you're going to
How
go
do you make a permanent decision about your life like on an impulse? Because
well, this is why it started out. Everything was like very meticulously planned and laid out with an artist.
That's the type of personality I think you would be. Like,
So this one is like very well planned and laid out with a local. Most of it is done by a local artist named Jenny Bolger at Very Lame on Instagram. And then this arm, the top, like a quarter sleeve was really well planned. It's like all my Newfoundland stuff. There's a big puffin, my grandfather's army tags and stuff like that. And then I started to fill it in, but then it was like, I met this artist who's like you to do a whole sleeve together, you would have to do multiple sessions and really plan that out. But there was like, okay, well, there's a tattoo artist I really like who's only visiting in town for 2 weeks and I want to get a piece. Or I'm in Chicago, to use that example, and a friend got tattooed by this artist who I happened to meet and like, hey, let's get one. So it kind of, and this is like a running joke from tattoo people, is like, the very first one you get is incredibly meaningful. And then the second one you get is pretty meaningful. And then the third one you get is meaningful. And then by like the 12th one, you're like, I thought a frog with a cowboy hat was funny.
That is
I don't have that tattoo specifically, but that's the one in the meme. So that's how it'll go.
Grady would get tattooed. A frog with a cowboy hat. Yeah, it's a vibe for sure.
So what I would say is like, look, a lot of guys in the NBA go with the half sleeve to start or something like that. Plan it out. That's all.
Yeah,
that's all.
Don't get the Darren Williams gigantic panther, which you turn into an even bigger panther. I believe. Yeah. Don't
do was it Kenya Martin got his girlfriend's lips tattooed and had to cover it up when they broke up?
Right.
I think that was one.
Right.
Yeah.
That was kind of a hard tattoo, though. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah. Don't get Chinese characters tattooed on you, or if you do, just verify. Just
get someone to tell you what it means.
Just come talk to me first. Show me the thing. And then we'll go from there. Anyway, that's all that could possibly be said about the Raptors, at least today. We're actually going to get into a little bit around the NBA and then actually check in on teams like the Timberwolves with Hanif in hour 2, which I'm super excited about. But Blake, part of the reason you're away is also because you also have to do, first off, I don't know how you do this, but you have your own 2-hour show that you will be launching.
When we're
done. Relaunching. I guess when we're done. But in any case, you've been prepping for this very long Jays season up ahead of us. So we have 5 minutes here. As someone who is famously a very novice Jays fan, or a very casual Jays fan, let's just say that, What should I be watching out for this year, Blake?
Yeah, it's a pretty high leverage year for the Blue Jays. Like there should be a lot of urgency to this team.
What's on the line? Like,
so
are they going to break it up if they don't win this year?
I mean, they might not have. I don't know about break it up, because like baseball teams definitely do tear it down and rebuild and stuff like that. But the returns are way less immediate, right? Like your draft pick is like 5. You can't trade picks, first of all, in baseball unless they're special compensatory picks. So it's more about the prospects you get. And those prospects are years away and might not hit and things like that. So the idea of a teardown is way less sexy in baseball than it is in basketball because those returns are so far down the line. But what the Blue Jays are facing is Bo Bichette and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. are the faces of the franchise.
Yep.
They have 2 years left before free agency. Bo is on an extension that they worked out that ends after next year. You could sign him to a long-term deal, but he's under contract. Vlad went to the arbitration process.
Yes.
He has 1 more year of arbitration, and then he'd be a free agent. So if you are looking at this young core, and Manoah was a part of that originally, he's a bit of a question mark
What's
right now.
To him, by the way?
He's injured now. He made 1 spring start and has been dealing with shoulder fatigue. He's basically only playing catch right now. He showed up to camp looking great too, which is so it's disappointing.
The fall off is crazy because he was on How Hungry Are You with Serge once upon a time.
Yeah, I mean he was on Cy Young ballots. Like he was the opening day starter last year.
It's a bigger deal if you're on How Hungry.
Yeah,
for you, for me. Yeah,
yes.
keep going. Yeah.
So yeah, they're facing. They've got and because those guys, the way baseball works, probably even more so than basketball, is you really want to hit when your best players are still young and affordable because the economics of baseball are so disproportionate. Like there's so much disproportionate value in young guys being good and you're overpaying free agents. So this front office is built, well, okay, when Bo and Vlad peak, we're going to have George Springer and Kevin Gausman and Chris Bassett and Jose Barrios, and those guys are going to be here and ready. Well, those guys are all into their 30s now. Gausman's contract will be a year closer to being done. Bassett will be a year closer to free agent. This is Kikuchi's last year. George Springer declined a lot last year. He might bounce back this year, but we might be heading into the tail end of that. And the Blue Jays have the worst farm system in their division. So there aren't a lot that you can get excited about a guy or two here and there, but there aren't a ton of reinforcements coming to have this like if your plan was
they got Jamias Ramsey and Javon Freeman Liberty, no offense.
Right. So if your thinking was, well, once those old guys age out, Vlad and Bo will be on new long-term contracts, and then we'll have this inexpensive wave of young talent coming to support them. Right now, the farm system doesn't look like that. So there's a real urgency around this year. They've also, over the last 4 years, got swept in the first round of the playoffs in the extended pandemic playoffs.
Yep.
Missed the playoffs by a game.
Yep.
Got swept in the first round of the playoffs. Got swept in the first round of the playoffs.
Oof.
So imagine how that would feel. Like, imagine the LeBron stuff, but it's happening in the first round every year. And
it's not LeBron. It's just random teams that you don't even weren't even that good.
This is the Seattle Mariners. It's the so there's a real urgency to this year. They right now,
sports like this,
if I were to pick, I think they're going to make the playoffs. I don't think they're going to win the division. And in baseball, that keeps you in the mix. But you're headed for another best 2 out of 3 first round playoff series probably. And you've got some question marks here. Like I think they're a worse team on paper than they were at this point last year. You're banking a lot on Vlad taking a big step back to where he was prior to last year, because last year was a real down year for him. And you're crossing your fingers you have really good health on the pitching side again. So they're gonna be fun and interesting and good, but there should be a lot of pressure on them. Like you got to go on a playoff run this year. Like not making the playoffs or getting bounced in the first round again could be kind of the close to this window.
This sounds like the 2-minute conversations I had with Justin Bourne about the Leafs.
Yeah,
this actually reminds me a lot of that. Now, of course, I know there's 2 different sports, but wow, this city is really tortured, man. I mean, I guess the Raptors
we're not that tortured. The Raptors won the championship 5 years ago.
I know, but outside of that, man, it's just this type of pressure all the time. But anyway, we're gonna take another break. I'm looking forward to the J season, I suppose.
No, look forward to it. It's going to be fun. It's just going to be high pressure.
I will watch. There's not that much else in the summertime for me to tap into, at least in Toronto. But we're going to take this break. I've been your host, Will. You've been listening to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Brought to you by Campbell's New Chunky Spice Soup. Welcome back to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, Lou. Continue to be joined by co-host Blake Murphy. We're going to go around the NBA. We haven't done this in a minute. I'm not going to lie to you. We've done... Ahmed tried to pitch on around the NBA, but it was like he actually called it something totally different. But in any case, I was like, around the NBA? Is that it? Anyway, this is officially around the NBA. We're gonna go through some quick topics around the league. Everyone knows what this is. Okay, this one first is from yesterday's game. So Kyrie hits the game winner over Nikola Jokic. If you haven't seen it already, you absolutely need to see it. It was literally the last thing I saw before pivoting to Raptors Magic, which was quite the change. It was a style change. Let's say the vibe changed between Kyrie hitting a driving left-handed running bank shot, or not bank shot, a hook shot. Actually, was all net. Contested from 20 foot out at the buzzer to hit the game winner over a 7-footer. It's actually just genuinely one of the most jaw-dropping plays I've ever seen. And my takeaway from that game was just, that's the best game winner since what?
Yeah, well, that's a great way to put it, because it meant that I got to spend a chunk of this afternoon just watching cool recent game winners. So there are obviously a lot of candidates. The NBA is full of cool moments all the time. It is tough to find one that feels more difficult than that one. So there was I'm not going to credit the person because I forget who tweeted out, but someone tweeted the other day that they had asked Kyrie recently, or not recently, but in the past, about like, what else could you possibly add to your bag? Like, have you reached the skill level? He's like, I don't know, lefty hook shot. Right. And then he pulls it out. So I did go through some and try to find some candidates to compete with that. So this year, there was a Malik Monk one where he's guarded by Wiggins and he's driving to his left in the paint and he kind of slips and Wiggins is contesting well. And like within the slip, he takes it to his right hand and just like kind of flings it and banks it off the backboard.
Okay.
That one looks crazier, but very little of what happened was intentional.
That's the thing that's difficult with this, is because there's like obviously half court game winners or like full court shots or whatever. But like, to me, that doesn't hit the same. The thing with the Kyrie is like, I can't believe this guy actually thought this shot through and intended to do that and practiced it to some degree, which he actually was able to execute it without it looking fluky.
Right. So this year, there are a couple. Luka and Steph has so many this year alone.
Right.
But like, we're used to that, right? Like Steph pulling up from 33 is like, I'm used to it. So there was one this year that I think could compete with it. I would give the edge to Kyrie. But there was one Thunder against Nuggets, and they had a couple of really good battles. And Shea's driving against Peyton Watson, who's obviously a really good individual defender. And he hits him with a spin move into a fadeaway just above the elbow. And like Shea's like not quite parallel to the ground, but it's like a fading fadeaway. And that one's all intent, right? Like that's one-on-one, driving at you with speed, hitting the quick stop into a spin and fading before you can contest. That's the closest one I could find this year, non-Steph category. But I'd still give the edge to Kyrie for just like the gall of taking that shot.
That's the thing. It's like, it's very hard because you could always go to, I mean, even the Raptors, you could obviously go to the Kawhi shot, right? Which honestly was a bit luck, but at the same time, we've also seen Kawhi intentionally go for that baseline shot all the time. He had hit a game winner against Portland earlier that year in the regular season where he made that exact same move from pretty much the same spot on that right baseline. I actually only realized this because I was preparing for the Dwayne Casey interview last week. So I rewatched the game where Casey came back with the Pistons for the first time and they won on the buzzer beater. And Dwayne Casey was like, nah, I was celebrating because we won. I'm like, nah, that's Dwayne. Come on, man. In any case, the play that people don't remember is the game was tied, obviously, and the Pistons won it at the buzzer there. The Raptors actually had the ball, and Kawhi actually drove towards the right baseline for the stop on the baseline pull-up. And he actually dribbled off his foot, which is so funny because that's the exact same move, obviously, later on that will change the whole like season. So you can always go with those. You can even go with the OG corner 3 with 0.5 seconds with a great pass from Kyle. But there's a couple that, for me, at least watching a bunch of game winners recently, that really stuck out to me. For me, one of the coolest things is the fact that DeMar DeRozan hit 2 game winners, one on New Year's Eve. I think this is 2021 to end the year there. And then 2022, New Year's Day, they played a back-to-back on those 2 days, and DeMar hit a game winner on both of them. The first one was against Indiana, where he did a crossover going to his right, jumped off his left leg, right leg is up in the air the entire time, and he cashes in a super contested 3, which was just so cool. And then the next day, he got an inbound, ran to the corner, and pump faked the first defender out of his shorts. Then the second defender came over. He still shot over the second defender and hit a 3. They were down 2, too. So he needed to actually hit the 3 to even get it to a game winner. But back-to-back game winners over New Year's is still pretty sick to me. But I don't know, artistry-wise, they're neither of them are even close to what Kyrie did. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Like, skill-wise is just absurd, man.
So I want to circle back to DeMar in a minute because there were also some big Jamal Murray heroics in this one. And there's an interesting debate going on about that is going to come about who should be clutch player of the year, which is a newish award.
Yeah.
De'Aaron Fox won it last year, of course, and Steph is obviously the leading candidate, but I think DeMar and Jamal both have a say in there as well. So I did find some other ones that we came across. There's the LeBronto one, unfortunately, which was also whoever did this mix. Play. Whoever did this mix was like Kawhi buzzer beater, LeBronto, OG against the Celtics. I'm like, why would you do it in that order?
Let's get the Raptors back to the playoffs, man. We do crave some memorable moments for sure.
Yeah, why would you do it in that order? Jamal has actually had some good ones. He had that wild step back over Jeremy Grant last year, which was a big one. I didn't go back as far as you did.
Okay.
The recent vintage one, because I fired up some of the same playlists you did of like playoff winners and stuff like that. And this wasn't a winner. This just forced overtime. But Game 5 Heat Bucks last year, Jimmy is falling on an inbound and just volleys the inbound in.
Yeah.
Which was the craziest one I could see. But again, unlike the Kyrie one, there's not like an intent and a skill to that. That's a crazy like gamer toughness play to make with good touch. But Jimmy Butler wasn't like, let's draw this up for me to fall on my butt, get knocked down, and like tip in a crazy pass.
That's the thing. He got a shot off. A lot of people can get a shot off, and it's a low percentage shot, but it goes in. For Kyrie, he got he planned that shot in advance. That's the thing that's so cool to me, man. Because I have someone there's one where Luka against the Grizzlies, one of many Luka Magic moments where he's the Grizzlies the Grizzlies are up 2 over the Mavs. Luka runs to the inbounder, catches it like really close, just above the 3-point line there, and he like splits JV and Dylan Brooks, and then he's leaning forward, and he's almost leaning to the point where he's at the free throw line, and it just flips it up. But because he took off with 1 foot behind the 3-point line, it's actually a 3, and he hit the game winner there on like a running floater. But like that's a bit of a lucky shot.
Nobody show that tape to Wemby because he's gonna try something like that, and he's gonna flip in a layup for 3 points.
Yeah.
What are some other? I guess like not favorite one because the Kawhi one's the favorite one, but there's the one from I think that same year where Dame hits the like 37-footer in Paul George's eye, where Paul George afterward had to be like, "That's a bad shot. It's a bad shot." I'm like, "Okay, man, it's a bad shot that he just walked you off with."
That's a bad shot is a terrible comeback too. One of the all-time game winners. Yeah,
that's something I would say to Assad in the Raptors Republic 3-on-3 tournament. Okay, you hit that, but I forced you into a bad shot.
Yeah, at least this time I didn't bring it up. Well, one of my personal favorites too, going through this exercise, Dwayne Wade with when he was obviously on the Heat, a blind steal against John Salmons. Who remembers John Salmons on the Bulls? Although he was part of that. Okay, the series between Chicago and Boston that was super memorable. They won 7 games.
All my John Salmons memories are unfortunate Raptors ones.
Yeah, exactly.
1,600 minutes in a rebuilding season.
Oh God, but Dwayne Wade steals it from John Salmons, then runs the length of the floor and launches the one-legged 3, hits it, and then he jumps on the scoring table and he goes, "This is my house." That was really cool, man.
Yeah,
it's an all-time.
Do you remember when Jalen Rose jumped on the scorer's table at a Raptors game, like at ACC?
Everyone mentions this one. What happened to that one?
So I can't find when it was. I would love to find the actual game, but I was there at the game. And I distinctly remember it, like the Raptors going on a run, but it's a bad Raptors team in a not super meaningful game. And Jalen Rose gets on the scorer's table, but I can't I need to ask like Doug Smith or something like that, who's someone who has like the long-term memory of every little game.
You gotta ask Herbie. Herbie was like, "Get off my desk."
Yeah. When did Jalen Rose put his feet on your workspace?
Because it's one thing for Dwayne Wade to do it. Okay, that's like arguably the greatest Heat of all time. Actually, probably the greatest Heat player of all time. But like, come on, Jalen Rose for the Raptors in that year. I'm happy you did it, but in any case.
All right, you got more? You wanna move on to the Dame question?
Well, there was one thing that Dame tweeted after the game too in response to the game winner. He said Kyrie is the most skilled MFer ever. Do you have players more skilled off the top of your mind than Kyrie?
I mean, from a ball skill perspective, it's hard to imagine, right? Like you would.
He's in that like Allen Iverson zone at least.
Yeah, and I'm sure Ray Alston as far as the handle went because he was an and one guy, but Kyrie has the best handle in the league. He probably Steph and Dame are better pull-up shooters, but Kyrie probably has the best dribble package into that and the best footwork on it, other than maybe James Harden. With the ball in his hands, it's hard to imagine. And obviously skill is different. Jokic's skill level involves a lot of passing and vision stuff, but Jokic is not stringing someone out and destroying them one-on-one and able to get into any shot he could possibly want to get into. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's hard to picture who would like AI is probably the comp.
AI is the guy that first came into my mind, but I mean, I think that as you mentioned, there's individual skills. Like, Steph is like obviously the most skilled shooter, for example, but like I think Kyrie might be the most skilled layup maker ever.
Yeah, and like Shea might have the best mix of tempos and directions right now. Like I've said on the show that I think Shea might be the hardest guy to guard one-on-one in the league right now.
Yeah,
just like in a pure one-on-one situation because there are so many options to go to. But a lot of that is about timing and size and angles and stuff like that. If we're talking pure ball skill, like, I think Kyrie's probably the best in the league.
Best, honestly. The thing with the Kyrie, I think he explained it once where he's like, I don't actually know what move I'm going to make. I'm just going to react to whatever the defender's doing. And like, how you supposed to, you can't actually guard against that. That's like the ultimate counter to anything. He's looking to counter you.
Yeah.
He's actually, and he knows that he's practiced each shot. The one Kyrie played too is just when he was the Team USA scrimmage practice where the seniors were doing a great job against the select squad. I think Kyrie might have been on the select squad of just like full court pressure, and they're pressuring everybody. And Kyrie just says, screw this, give me the ball on the inbound. And he literally dribbled through the entire team. Like, there's like 5 players pressing him. And at one point, he did a cut dribble with his right hand, bounced it off his knee, his left knee intentionally, back to him. He did a crossover from his hand to his knee. Like,
and he's doing Jason Williams stuff.
Yeah.
He's on that white chocolate.
There you go. What else are you gonna?
It's great. No, I mean, I have more on the clutch shooting stuff. No, not much more on Kyrie. Obviously, there's also a real history of him doing this stuff in the playoffs too, which is we'll see. Maybe the Mavericks won't tank out of a play-in spot this year intentionally, so that they can keep their number 10 pick and then bench him behind Daniel Gafford.
Do you take the Mavs? How seriously do you take the Mavs as a contender?
Not like. The amount you have to take them seriously because they could conceivably have the best player in any playoff series short of the Nuggets series, maybe. Like Luka's that good, and Kyrie, we've seen playoff Kyrie as a number 2 option, and it's incredible. I don't love the way the rest of that is rounded out. Like even acknowledging they had an okay trade deadline, adding Gafford and stuff like that.
Gafford's a hit for me for sure.
Yeah. And Derek Lively's still good. So and there are pieces there. It's just like every team in the West is so good.
Yeah. Do you like them more than Phoenix? Phoenix to me is very clearly is a bad good team. Yeah. Like I'm not impressed by them.
Like they're the Antoine Walker of teams. Like they're either the best bad team or the worst good team.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I love
the Mike James in April type of season.
I love the story, but I don't think Isaiah Thomas is going to fix.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, point of attack defense is not exactly going to improve. That's an awesome story though. As I'm happy back in the league.
Yeah, I was actually going to put it in this list, but I was just genuinely happy for him, and it was not something to really joke about for me. But he's been grinding, he's been begging, and he's put in the work to get back in the league. I respect that immensely. What I really want to talk about too is Wemby, because this is how my night on Sunday went. Okay, I was watching Mavericks versus Nuggets. It was a super exciting game. Nuggets almost came back. They actually took the lead with Jamal's 3, and then Luka hit a 3, and then Kyrie hit that shot. Then I watched Raptors Magic, which, was what it was, and then did the React pod. And then as soon as the React pod was over, I'm like, oh, man, after 6 straight hours of basketball, what am I going to do? Boom, it's time to watch Nets versus Spurs. So I tapped into that as well. And Wemby, in the overtime win over Brooklyn, tallies 33 points, 16 rebounds, 7 assists, and 7 blocks in 36 minutes. The only other player in NBA history to match that stat line is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, which makes sense, honestly. He's that unique, Wemby is. And it led to me with this idea for you, Blake Murphy. So I'm going to give you 4 stat lines, and you're going to tell me which one is fake.
Okay.
These are 4.
3 of them are real, 1 is fake?
3 of these are actual Wemby stat lines, and 1 of them is fake. Okay. Stat line number 1, 27 points on 10 of 14 shooting, 2 threes, 14 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, 10 blocks in 29 minutes. I'm going to give you a chance to guess which is.
I know that one's real because I was there. I experienced that one very, very closely. Yeah, that was against the Raptors.
Yeah, 10 blocks is absolutely incredible in that one. So that's okay. We know A is not the right answer here. Okay. B, 31 points on 11 of 17 shooting, 3 threes made, 12 rebounds, 6 assists, a steal, and 7 blocks in 31 minutes. Okay. This is somehow just a generic
31,
game
12,
now.
and 6 with 7 blocks.
Yeah.
Ho-hum.
Yeah.
Okay, can I wait till the end to pick, or I got to say
Yes.
each
I'm
one?
going to
Okay.
present the next one as well.
Okay.
20 points on 8 of 20 shooting, 20 rebounds, 4 assists, a steal, 4 blocks in 31 minutes. And then the last one, 29 points on 11 of 15 shooting, 3 threes, 11 rebounds, 6 assists, 2 steals, 5 blocks in 33 minutes.
I know he had a 2020. I don't know if that's the exact one.
Okay.
So I'm going to say C is real.
Okay.
So B or D is the fake one.
Yeah. They are remarkably similar.
I will say D is the fake one just because that's just so efficient.
Yeah, it is D. D is the fake one. That's pretty good. But the fact that, again, 29 points, 3 rebounds, or
Also,
11 rebounds, 3
you're a
threes.
sicko for having B and D. Like, we're talking a difference of 2 points and 1 rebound and 1 steal. I'm supposed to know the difference? It was a coin toss. But yeah, I remember the 2020 and then obviously the Raptors game.
Again, these are just like, what is going to be that like unique stat? Like, there's certain players with unique stat lines you remember them for. Like, LeBron's being 27-7-7, for example. Is there one that you're going to look at?
Kirilenko being the 5x5.
Yeah, you're only going to, when you see the numbers, you will immediately know the player. What are the numbers going to look like for Wemby on those?
Yeah, that's
because I feel like he can average like 5 blocks in a season if he really wanted to.
I mean, he's at 3.5 right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. Like 1.3 steals is so far away from 5 steals. So to put it into 5x5 territory is tough. But I guess my guess for this will be the quadruple double. Like, we haven't seen one in forever.
Yeah, right. No, it will take a man like Wemby to do something like that. But yeah, Wemby with a myriad of plays down the stretch last night. Friend of the program, Dennis Schroeder, tried to take over the offense at moments for the Nets. I mean, it felt like everyone got a chance to take over and nobody could score in an efficient way. Cam Thomas couldn't do it. Mikal Bridges hit a 3, but otherwise he wasn't really doing much either. I don't know, man. There was a play where Dennis tried to go in for a layup against Wemby, and it was originally called as a goaltending, but then they went to the review, and it was actually a clean block as well. So just a really, really incredible game from Wemby. Earlier last week, Wemby was asked in French by a reporter named Theo about contending for Defensive Player of the Year. He answered, this is in French, translated to English. He said, quote, "I know that Rudy Gobert has a very good chance of winning it this year, and it will be well-deserved. Let him win it now, because after that, it's no longer his turn." Is that a bar? Is that a bar or not a bar?
Absolutely it is. I love that.
Yeah.
It's great. I think it's also like, it's fun because they're both, he's speaking to French language media. They're both obviously products of the French program. So like I'm sure there's a little bit of fun with it there.
Yeah.
But also I like that element of Wemby. Like you should, and I think that's just as important on the defensive end as being like a star scorer, is like you have to unquestionably believe you're the best defensive player on the floor. I like that attitude. I like that mentality. And we've like in terms of realisticness or realism, we've talked about over the course of the year with a stat like estimated plus minus EPM, how difficult it is to produce high level marks on a bad team.
Yeah.
So why Scotty's kind of declined over the course of the year, even though they're still very good for a player on a team of that quality, it's hard. And Wemby is on a very bad
that team is awful. Yeah.
And
you take Wemby off the team, they're worse than the Wizards.
And he is still 8th in the league in defensive EPM.
Yeah.
And we're talking about, like, I mean, some of these guys shouldn't, like Xavier Tillman should not count because he's split time between 2 teams and doesn't have enough minutes. I should have put a minutes filter on this. Jonathan Isaac hasn't played a ton. Even Marcus Smart hasn't played very much. Joel Embiid hasn't played all that much. Like, he's theoretically top 5, and the names ahead of him are Hartenstein, Caruso, and Evan Mobley. Right. Like that's the level of guy he's in there with. And this is acknowledging that it's a really, really bad team, and it's hard to do that. So I know one of your questions was going to be, when could we start the clock on is he going to win Defensive Player of the Year?
Yeah.
And I think it's as soon as next year. The hardest part is going to be, even with how good Wemby is defensively, the Spurs are 22nd in defense now. Yeah. And we've gone through this with Raptors, last year when OG didn't get votes because the Raptors defense wasn't that good or whatever. We know that it's tough to get those votes if you're not anchoring a very, very good defense. Maybe you could get there if you're anchoring an average defense with nobody around you, but 26th in the league, people are going to have Wemby on their ballot. I'd be surprised if he gets a lot of number 1 votes just because he hasn't dragged the team to good defense yet. And that's not fair to him, but that's how the award voting works.
See, the thing is, the question I'm asking for myself, and I suppose I would like to ask to award voters as well, is, for example, this year, Rookie of the Year was like if you could put Wemby on OKC instead of Chet, would they be even better? And the answer is absolutely yes.
Mhm.
So I want Wemby over Chet to win Rookie of the Year. I feel like that's already been kind of decided as well. Do you think Minnesota's a better defense if they had Wemby instead of Rudy?
That's a tough one.
Okay.
I would say probably slightly no,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
not for very much longer. Like
Not for
Rudy-
much longer.
And like
Yeah.
you know how much trouble I have giving Rudy
Oh,
Gobert
yeah.
his due.
That's actually a question later on.
Yeah, I have a little bit of trouble with that. But I mean, he is
Okay.
like he's won a bunch of Defensive Player of the Year. He's still at that level defensively.
Yeah.
I feel like this the way Wemby feels about it, which is like, we'll let Rudy have it for this year, and that's that's kind of it.
That's a great answer from him.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, speaking of great quotes, Greg Popovich said, quote, all my Bordeaux's are older than Victor. That's a true statement. And he was talking about he's got wines in his cellar, Greg Popovich does, that are older than Wemby. First off, Wemby's only like 20. So like, bragging about having a 21-year-old wine is not necessarily the biggest thing. In any case, I don't think he was trying to brag. I think he's actually just trying to.
I think
put
he's
into
trying to get on
context.
accidental Bronson.
First off, that's pretty hard. I like that one as well. But in any case, do you own anything that is older than Victor, who, by the way, was born January 4th, 2004?
Probably not.
Yeah. Okay.
Like 2004, he was born when I was in high school. I can't imagine I own anything from high school still.
Fair enough. Okay, maybe
Right?
it's impressive that Greg Popovich has wines older than Wemby.
I definitely don't have wine older than that.
What's the oldest wine in your cellar right now?
I don't know. A couple weeks ago at the LC.
They don't last longer than a couple of weeks.
By the way, I've gone back through every Defensive Player of the Year. The last time someone won Defensive Player of the Year and their team wasn't top 5 in defensive rating, 2007, Marcus Camby.
Wow.
And they were 11th. So that's
okay, that's a good point.
That's
a really
16 years in a row now
Yeah.
that the Defensive Player of the Year has come off a top 5 defense, and the Spurs are 22nd.
All right.
So I think
Wemby,
he's so good.
You know what? Take it to another level then. You know what? If you can even get yourself to a top 10 level defense, if you can get this Spurs team to a top level defense, then yeah, I think people will have to give it to you. I know they're already guard at that level when he's on the floor, but I need you to be like the unquestionable best defense in the league when you're on the floor, and then maybe you'll survive the other 12 when you don't play.
Yeah.
Or another 18, really, because I feel like he still only plays 30 minutes a game.
Yeah,
which
he
is
played,
the
what,
wildest
30,
part.
36 last night, but it was an OT game.
Yeah, he basically plays 30 minutes a night. He does this.
That's because they're mindful of their position in the standings. By the way, it's very, very amusing to me that the Raptors losing to the Pistons. I know some people were like, this helps the tank. It's a loss or whatever. It actually knocked the Raptors' second-round pick down a spot.
Goodness.
The Pistons have passed the Wizards now in the standings.
Yeah, and I don't think the Wizards are I don't think the Kuzma combo is going to carry them any higher in the standings. Lastly, I think LeBron is starting a podcast with JJ Redick. It's going to be called Mind the Game. They're going to be discussing X's and O's. They're going to be talking about just in general, I guess, like what player podcasts will do in general, exchanging stories. Are you excited for this podcast? Because for me, I'm going to say no.
Well, excited's not the right word.
Okay,
I'm
okay.
interested. I'm interested as like kind of a counter to what's out there. Like if this is like a standard LeBron offering where it's like LeBron's version of his history.
I'm not trying to hear the shop in podcast form with JJ Redick. That's why I'm not excited.
Right. And
it's
like
too scripted.
So one of the most fascinating things about LeBron, if you've done scrums with LeBron or postseason, like podium stuff with him before, is he has this incredible level of recall for every single thing that's happened in every single play.
Right.
Like you ask him about this, and this isn't me personally. I've heard people ask him about something, and he'll relate it to this play from like 3 years ago. If this is a old man and the three style podcast where they're talking more about the basketball side of things, I think it could be a really fascinating, like similar to the Manning cast on the football side, a really insightful look into how someone who thinks the game at a level that no one could possibly fathom, like how they process, how they remember stuff, how they even just what is the vocabulary when he's talking about X's and O's stuff with JJ Redick. I think that could be really interesting, especially if especially as a one-off of like, this is how we're going to have this conversation. And I know JJ Redick's very passionate about there needs to be more of this in basketball media, and he would like to champion that. I think having a guy like LeBron be able to switch from, hey, we're going to go very narrative and the shop focused to I'm going to get in the weeds and talk about the X's and O's stuff and how I, hey, when 13 possessions in a row, I'm running corner action against the Raptors and picking out Dellavedova and Kenny Fry. Like, how are you processing that? And look, it doesn't have to be that example. He's done that to every team in the NBA over the years. But like how you process that, how you, to your point about Kyrie and how he's reacting to the defense, how much of that is intentional and what you anticipate the defense is going to do versus you reacting to what the defense is doing. I think that could be really insightful about, like, you cannot, in any sport, in any field, you can't get to the level of LeBron without being a fascinating thinker about the thing you're doing as well. So hopefully this gives us a big window into that.
That is that, because in this article on The Athletic about the launch of this podcast, one of the lines is, the concept of the program is meant to be a departure from talk shows like ESPN's First Take, where Redick is a contributor. So, I think that's a good thing in terms of, being able to just hear the insight from two very long-time pros, including LeBron, who is, like, at worst, like, a top 2 player of all time.
Yeah.
For me, I'm just like, LeBron is so careful and so, like, produced as, like, a person and, like, a persona that, like, I would really love to see him relax and be able to talk in a way that, like, not everything is going to be quoted and turned into, like, this big debate, but just to be able to have a discussion more than anything else. And I've never seen LeBron content where he's just free to be himself. He has to be so, like, meticulously calculated on every single step. And to me, I'm like, that's hard to produce a podcast based off that. You know what I mean?
And now he has permission to nerd out.
And hopefully if they bring that out, I think that'll be the best part. But in any case, are you worried about, being a non-player podcaster at this point? Like, it's just every single one is we're gonna get outclassed by every single one.
Yeah, but we need for me to be in trouble. This has to happen, and then you got to start having baseball guys do their own podcasts on the science of hitting and like pitch design. Not as much their own, but like there are some baseball guys who like talk this stuff at a really like. There's some guys who get really into talking about pitch design and grips and mechanics and stuff like that, or hitters who talk the science of hitting.
Right.
Well, I don't think there's anything equivalent of JJ Redick in the space. There are some very good former players, like Eric Kratz is a former catcher who does a really good as the number 2 on a podcast. There are guys like that, but I don't think there's anything equivalent to Redick.
There you go. All right.
Well, so I'm safe for now.
Oh, yeah. I am not. Okay, we're going to take our break. Last one of the day. I'm your host, Will. You've been listening to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network, brought to you by Campbell's New Chunkies by Zoop. When we come back, Hanif Abdurraqib.
Welcome back to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm Blake Murphy alongside William Liu. Very excited about our next guest. One of my favorite writers, one of my favorite poets, one of my favorite basketball tweeters as well. And now he's dabbling in our yard. He's writing ESPN pieces on the Minnesota Timberwolves. We're joined now by Hanif Abdurraqib. Hanif, what's up, man? Thanks for joining us.
Thank y'all for having me. It's a real pleasure. Yeah, good to see you, Blake.
Yeah, you too, man. So, look, we'll start with the book. You have a book out next week, March 26th. That's next Tuesday. People can pre-order it now wherever they pre-order their books. And it's called There's Always This Year on Basketball and Ascension. You've written a lot over the years about everything, man. Music, Black culture, poetry. For you to get to do this very, very personal book with deep, deep ties into basketball, how special has that been for you?
Oh, it's been incredible. It's been incredible largely because it's allowed me to kind of go back into the depths of the original things that made me a fan. This idea that basketball was, at least in my neighborhood growing up, a way to kind of act towards community or act against loneliness. Everyone in the hood I grew up in played basketball, and it was a language that we had kind of among ourselves. And so it was really good to kind of the book is asking some larger questions, I think, other than just basketball fandom. It's asking questions about life and mortality and the passage of time. But to have basketball as a container for that, and to have it allow me to look back not only on my own basketball life, but also the lives of players I love. Of course, LeBron James at the center of it. And a lot of Ohio players that I think, people maybe are not as familiar with. But it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure, really. And I think it's also coming at a good time for me because I feel like I'm reframing my relationship with basketball fandom as I get older, and perhaps I'm a little less demanding than I used to be as a fan.
I gotta ask.
We've yet to get there.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, we'll talk a little bit about the Timberwolves and your fandom in general in a little bit. I got to ask you have this big book tour coming up as well. You're not coming to Toronto on any of the announced dates yet, but this is a book tour that lines up pretty closely with the NBA playoffs. You have this all settled yet? How you're gonna? I love talking to like musician friends about this, about like how you're gonna watch these games, these playoff games while you're on stage, while you're on tour. Do you have this planned out yet?
Yeah, I actually have a really rigorous plan. I will say I'm planning on being in Toronto in the fall.
Awesome.
Oh, great.
In September, I'm doing a thing in Kitchener, and then I'm going to come down to Toronto.
Nice.
And spend some time with y'all. So
Nice.
I'll be in Toronto. But in terms of the book tour, yeah, I have a plan. The Timberwolves games are going to be tough because I don't necessarily mind spoilers. I don't really care if someone tells me the score. I'm kind of notorious for if I'm on stage and there's a game, I'd ask people to shout out the score to tell me what it is. But I have League Pass, which of course allows you to replay the games from the start. So I'm going to be sleeping during the day so I can kind of stay up late at night and do some game replays, not just Timberwolves games, but I'm a big, I love the playoffs. I love the NBA playoffs. And my plan is that I'll be off stage almost always before the West Coast game, before whatever the Western Conference game is. So I might actually miss that many Timberwolves minutes. But the problem is my book signing lines. My book signing lines tend to go for over an hour. Yeah. So even if I'm off of the stage at 9, I probably won't be somewhere where I can watch a game until at least 10:30, 11. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of late nights. When I'm going to take naps during the day, I'm going to have people give me updates from the stage. I will have like a person in the audience score watching for me. But I'm excited. To have not just for the Timberwolves, but for it feels like this is a real lining up to be a real exciting NBA playoffs.
Yeah, he's not kidding about the book signing lines. I was at the last one at the Reference Library in Toronto, and you were very generous. It was well over an hour after your panel had finished, and you were still there to sign some books.
But let me add, you were there, you were waiting to get your book signed. You're not going to be offended if there's like a phone up on the desk like this, right? Like you're waiting to get signed, and he's like, who is this for? And he accidentally signed like Anthony Edwards. Oh, to Anthony Edwards. No, I mean Will. Oh no.
I'm gonna ask this man what Jordan McLaughlin's stat line is. Like we're gonna connect on that level. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
it's I will say during. I'm also a big MLS soccer fan, and there was a point in 2018 when the Crew were in the playoffs and they had this like penalty kick shootout against Atlanta while I was doing a reading in Nebraska. Maybe I should admit this publicly, but it was years ago. I had someone in the very back of the room playing it on like a screen I could see. And so while I was doing my reading, I would glance up every now and then and see the outcome. I won't be doing that on this tour for anyone who's like, don't worry, I won't be doing that on this tour.
Yeah.
Also, look, man, if someone's coming out to hear you do reading and get their book signed, your book about basketball and all the connections you have to it and through it, and they're going to be like, man, this guy whose basketball book I'm trying to read and get signed is keeping an eye on the basketball game, I think people would forgive you, man. I think it'd be all right.
You mentioned this earlier, but you said you reframed your relationship to fandom and what to expect from basketball. What was it before? What is it now? And sort of what was that process that took you to get to that point?
It's strange because I was a much more demanding fan. Which is so funny because the Timberwolves have been awful I've been a Timberwolves fan since I was a kid, and they've been awful for 85% of my life, varying degrees of awful. But I do think that because of that, I think, you, as a fan, at least for me, the worse the team is, the greater the deceptions are. You know what I mean? Because every year I could be like, well, the Timberwolves are bad last year, but it's a mixed bag. Anything can happen. And the same thing would happen, right? But then at the beginning of the next year, I'd say, well, anything can happen, right? I'm looking at these like Love Rubio teams where there's just not a lot on the roster. And I'm like, well, they could go on a run. And so my expectations were colored by these deceptions I was telling myself. And I don't know what it is. I think a few years ago, I decided to get very honest with myself about the teams I love and what the teams I love were, what they actually had going for them. And it came at a good time because this is across the board. I think all the teams I support have become at least serviceable. Like I'm a Newcastle supporter, and they're good. The Crew won the championship last year. The Timberwolves are, hanging on by a thread. I'm not as optimistic as I was. They're hanging on by a thread, but they're there. I think they're gonna finish in the top 4. But all of this, I think, has become what me saying, I want to be honest about. I want to look at this team, be honest about what the roster looks like. I do think sports is a place for misplaced optimism, but for me, I've started to put a cap on that, I think.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because that's almost an intentional practice for a lot of sports.
Oh, it has to be. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's actually what a lot of people just do. Like, what the experience you're describing is basically what it meant to be a Raptor fan for like a solid 10 years between when Vince Carter left and when they started winning again in like 2014.
Yeah. And guess where we're back? At least temporarily, like some of the, in seriousness, like some of the things you just talked about, you know, these deceptions that you allow yourself to have. It's part of fandom, right? Like no one's going to want to hear us do these preview shows next year and come into the year and be like, well, the Raptors are capping out at 35 wins. You have to at least have the paths to where things could be better. But yeah, there's an element of realism in that same thought, Hanif. And you wrote this great piece for ESPN on the Timberwolves finally being real recently. How long did this Timberwolves team have to show it to you before you kind of let go of that and we're like, hey, I'm not being deceptive anymore. This team's actually good and actually, you know, like you said, they're finally real.
I think they're still showing. It still doesn't feel entirely real to me, I think. You know, every time because there are still some flaws on the team. There are still, you know, they still kind of have these moments where they play down to the level of their competition. I know we all love Anthony Edwards, but you know, the shot selection is a bit distressing at times. You know, the bench can be, you know, even now I find myself making these preemptive excuses for potentially being let down, you know, but it does feel, you know, I remember when they got to number 1 in the West early in the season. And I remember at that time being like, well, you know, I remember I even tweeted about it. I was like, Timberwolves are number 1 for the night. You know, it'll be a couple nights maybe. Now that's incredible. First time I'd seen them number 1 in the West in almost, you know, 20 years or whatever. And then you know, they stayed there for a couple weeks and then a month and then a month. And so it does feel real. But there's a little bit of heavy-heartedness for me here because it does feel like this is also happening on a clock. The Timberwolves are on a very real timeline that isn't very long, which we knew, I think, as fans when the Rudy trade happened, that this timeline is not necessarily long. And so I'm really trying to be in the moment and not think about the future. I'm not doing a lot of futurescaping with the Timberwolves, you know, because I look at the Raptors, right? There's some futurescaping that I think you can do as a Raptors fan that is not timeline list. Like Scotty Barnes definitely has a timeline, and that's important. But it also feels like you can build a timeline that is a bit more expansive than the Timberwolves, who feel like they've got like this year and maybe next, and that's it. They got to go for it, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the timeline, you wrote this in the piece that was really interesting to me. You wrote, quote, the Karl-Anthony Towns era, which isn't a single era, but an era in pieces. Can you describe the era in pieces of Karl-Anthony Towns' time with the Timberwolves?
Yeah, you know, for me, it's like heartbreaking. I know it's not a devastating injury, and hopefully he'll be back, but he was playing the best ball of his career this year. And kind of, well, I wouldn't say it was unsung. It began as unsung, and then I think people began to give him proper credit, just on both ends of the floor, playing the best ball of his career, or at least maybe the second best. He also had a great season that Jimmy Butler year, even though, of course, that marriage ended poorly. But yeah, I mean, he's someone who I know that he's often the butt of jokes and the laughing stock and all that, but he's really had a rough run, and not just due to his personal losses, but he's just had like 6 head coaches and 3 or 4 different front offices and rosters that have never been built around his skill set at all. And I think that's actually been a flaw of the Timberwolves' just entire team structure for a long time, having talent and not actually building around the talent thoughtfully. Even with KG, that team wasn't really built around his skill set thoughtfully until perhaps Rewell and Cassell. But Kevin Love, it was kind of just like, well, this is our star and we'll just get some guys. And that was kind of the thing with Cat. You know, there was a moment where, to speak about a moment of delusion, there was a moment when the Timberwolves had Cat, Wiggins, and Levine, all much younger than they are now. And I was like, this is going to be it. This is like the big 3. You know, this is kind of
big 3.
But they never really bought into Zach LaVine. They were playing him at point guard. You know, they were just tanking with them. And Wiggins was kind of always miscast, as we saw when he went to Golden State that first year, especially. And so the Karl-Anthony Towns career has been kind of divided in these experiments that haven't really served him. The Jimmy Butler Tibbs experiment, and the Wiggins LaVine experiment, and then the kind of Pat Bev hodgepodge team experiment, the D'Lo experiment. Some of those have gone better than others, but this is kind of this has been the greatest manifestation of And I think it's actually spearheaded by Rudy Gobert and Mike Conley. I know that Anthony Edwards has changed the dynamic of the team undoubtedly, but in terms of the impact on Karl Anthony Towns' game, there's a real thing that Rudy Gobert does for him that brings out a defensive ability that I think a lot of people didn't know he had. And there's a way that Mike Conley kind of sees him on the floor where he's just not standing in the corner waiting for a three. So hopefully he comes back. I mean, hopefully, the word is he'll be back right at the start of the playoffs. And I worry about a lot of these matchups in the West. I look at the West and I worry about the Timberwolves matching up with a lot of these teams. And so, we need them back, because the way it's shaking out now, if the Timberwolves end up getting, say, the Warriors even in that first round, that's a tough matchup. And then it only gets tougher from there.
Yeah, and the way it looks right now, honestly, the Kings are in 6 right now, and they're barely hanging on there. But that might be your best case scenario to avoid one of those kind of more star-driven teams that are juggling the play-in spots there. On the kind of Rudy Gobert era note, look, this Wolves team has been a lot of fun to cheer for. I'm a Cat guy. I love Anthony Edwards, Naz Reid, Mike Conley. This is a likable team. It's taken me some time to come around on Rudy Gobert. Because he was not in Utah the most exciting brand of player. Obviously, he has not been the most easy to appreciate guy.
As we know, he started the pandemic.
For on-court reasons and for nonsensical reasons. Did it take you a little bit to come around on Rudy Gobert too? I'd imagine as a Wolves fan, there's an extra layer I don't have to deal with, which is the asset cost to get Rudy Gobert in the first place too. Did it take you a bit to get there with Rudy?
I try not to think about the asset cost anymore. Because if I do, I don't know. I mean, was it worth it? I guess we'll not know. We'll never know.
You're 46 and 21. It's worth it for the moment.
Yeah, it's worth it for the moment. We don't know, if Keontae George becomes like a 10-time All-Star, I will be a little bit hurt. And who knows, but I think it feels worth it now. I will say it feels worth it right now. When the trade happened, I was devastated. I was on the road. I called my therapist. No joke. I called my therapist and talked through the trade as though she was like an NBA analyst, because I was like, am I imagining that this could? And I think it was mostly because Timberwolves fans at the time, many of them were so excited. Many of them were like, this is it. This is our win now move. And I had a moment where I was like, am I losing my mind? Like, I feel like this is a nightmare, But all of that is to say that I wanted to be incorrect. I desired to be incorrect. My brain was like, I don't see how this works. But maybe I'll be incorrect and it'll be good. And at least for right now, this year, the payoff is worth it. He's probably going to win, I would guess, Defensive Player of the Year, or at least be top 3. I just don't know who else. Wemby has a case, I think. But it just feels like they're not going to give it to a rookie, especially not a rookie on a losing team, even though I think the Spurs are losing not necessarily because of Wemby. That roster construct is they're pretty much just waiting for Trae Young. I feel like at this point they're just kind of like, they're just keeping the seat warm for Trae Young. So it feels like Rudy is going to win Defensive Player of the Year. He's elevated the play collectively of the team, which I think actually is a difference. I know that people talk about how Rudy in the playoffs in the past has gotten played off the floor. In Utah, he didn't have an elite perimeter defender playing alongside him, or at least not one at the level of Jaden McDaniels. And so I'm interested to see how this works in the playoffs, because Ant, when he locks in, he defends well. Jaden McDaniels is a great defender. Rudy is not overextended in the way that he's had to be in the past in Utah. So we'll see, but it is worth it. Today, it is worth it. I still try not to think about the total cost, because it's a little hard. But this is what sports. I mean, y'all know this. The Raptors. Sometimes you go for the one season. Exactly. Like, you take the swing for the one season. And sometimes that one season is miraculous. And no Raptors fan, I feel like, is going to be like, well, I wish we had that. I wish we had our guys back.
Yeah.
Well, they got Jakob Poeltl back, and then Keldon Johnson's the other piece of it. So I think they're fine. Yeah.
No, but the way you guys are describing Rudy is it's like buying a bottle, of Grey Goose at the club. You overpaid for this, but at least let's make the most of this moment, make some memories, and hopefully you can look back at it and say, you know what, in the moment it was the right thing. I think the coolest thing, too, is, obviously watching Edwards and through all of this, right? And Edwards, personality-wise, it feels like he's coming into the league, the number one personality in the league, at least for the young players coming up. He seems to really – I feel like old school guys love him, and also new school guys love him as well. And he almost seems to me has the personality of a superstar before his game matures to getting to superstar level impact. What's that level been like, or watching Anthony Edwards both as the person and also as the player?
It's been cool. That Pacers. I mean, I'm gonna remember the end of that Pacers
block?
game forever. That block he had was like watching that in real time. It's rare now. I've seen so many sports in my life, like I'm sure y'all have. It's rare that something happens in a sports game in real time that like stuns me, where I'm like, that I can't believe I just saw that. That was one of those moments. Even though if you were watching the game, you could kind of see it happening. You could kind of see him like tracking the ball. But there's moments like that where it just seems like he's capable of things that no one else is capable of. And I think there's a great crop of young talent. I mean, I know that, not everyone has his personality or his magnetic kind of thing, but I love SGA so much. Do not love when the Timberwolves have to play against him, but do love watching him independently. I mean, talking about the Raptors, I love Scotty Barnes. I mean, there's so many young players. I think like this crop of NBA talent, so many people feel this anxiety of what will happen when LeBron and Steph are gone. And I get that, the face of the league kind of question is there. But in terms of like a young under 23, 24 crop of talent, there's a lot of dudes who are talented. But I think that what Anthony Edwards has as a separating thing is that he's also kind of, there's a fearlessness to his personality that translates both on and off the court, for better and worse sometimes.
Yeah.
But there's something about him that's so magnetic and funny and unfiltered. There's a playfulness. It seems like he actually really loves playing basketball. He doesn't like to miss games. He really fights to play all the games he can. There's just not been I feel like Minnesota hasn't had a player like that, and I've seen a lot of players come through Minnesota and have told lies to myself about many of the players who come through Minnesota. I remember when the Timberwolves drafted Derek Williams, where I was like, this is the guy. He's gonna. So I mean, but that's what you do, right? So this is the first time where Timberwolves has drafted a guy, and I watched Anthony Edwards in college a lot, and I just wasn't very sold on his game, But I knew he was probably the best of that draft. But to have it pay off like this, I did not see it. Did not see it happening at this level this fast.
It's been a lot of fun, man, and they'll be fun. Hopefully, like you said, hopefully Cat's back and they can continue this fun into the playoffs and give you lots to watch on your book tour. Maybe an addendum at the end too, if there's hey, I released this basketball book and then the team I root for won a championship while I was on the book tour. Hanif, thanks for taking the time out, man. Best of luck with the book launch next week, and we'll push everyone to pre-order. There's always this year on Basketball and Ascension. Thanks, man.
Y'all, thanks for having me, and hopefully the Raptors give y'all something to feel good about as the season winds down.
It's tough to see, but I will do my best to look for those positives. Hanif Abdurraqib, poet, author, all around good guy, ESPN contributor once in a while on the Timberwolves as well. The book is There's Always This Year on Basketball and Ascension. It's out next Tuesday, March 26th, but you can pre-order it wherever you pre-order books right now. I got mine coming already. Very, very excited to dive into that.
Dude, this job's so cool. Especially when the Raptors are losing, it's like, all right, you know what? Like, we don't have to focus on every single detail of the Raptors. Let's expand a little bit. Let's have conversations that we've always wanted to have. And great idea.
What do you got for tomorrow? Because they don't play for a while.
What do we have for tomorrow? That's a question we have for our producer, Ahmed.
One thing we do have for tomorrow is Canada men's and women's get their Olympic draw tomorrow. That draw ceremony starts at 2 p.m. So we're not going to air it live. They tend to drag those things out. Right. But we will have the draws for you. Okay. And I think tomorrow I will reveal the teams for the media game.
There is a media game coming up involving all your favorite and least favorite Raptors media people. And that'll take place later this week. But that does it for us today. I've been your host, Willie. You've been listening to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Brought to you by Campbell's New Check Your Spicy Soup. Time to get fired up. Thanks again to producer Ahmed Mon and producer Dare Pendale, Jennifer Olnick Davis, Jared Mann to help me behind the scenes. Big thanks to our guest, Hanif Abdurraqib. And we'll be back tomorrow.